Doors closing.
And now something completely different.
Happy Hour. Happy Hour.
Call from
Tony Zazza.
What's up? This is Happy Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, and I'm very excited about this next guest, the one and only Tony Zazza, who I've met at the Morning Show Boot Camp, but I don't know if I've talked to you yet. He is live on Happy Hour. What's up, bro?
What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. So I'm often drunk at the Morning Show Boot Camp, so I can't remember. Have we actually talked before?
We have a few times. And
I was
that's not
drunk.
to throw you under the bus.
Yeah, I was drunk.
It's all good. I know how it goes. And you and I and Fitz actually spent one boot camp talking for a good 30 minutes or so.
Yeah. Dude, I was drunk that night. Like, you got to remember, I don't drink as much, so this year I won't be going as crazy, but some of the drunkest nights of my life have been at those radio conventions, bro.
I mean, it happens. But what happens at Morning Show Boot Camp stays at Morning Show Boot Camp.
Are you going this year?
I am, absolutely. It's in Austin, and I've got family in Texas, so Austin's one I'm definitely going to make sure to not miss.
I have an aunt that I see occasionally. I don't know if I'll see her. What I'm more excited about, I'm into stoicism, and there's a guy named Ryan Holiday who writes books and does like videos on it, and he has a bookstore in Austin, so I'm going to go buy it. I'm excited about that.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, definitely you got to hit that up.
So what are you up to now? I was listening to your app on Saturday. I sent you a text about it, and I really dig what you're doing on there, bro.
Thank you so much. You know, I'm still doing a little radio for Cumulus. I'm doing some stuff for Westwood One. But, you know, I spent almost 20 years in Dallas doing morning radio and then moved to the East Coast of Florida. Mike McVeigh moved me out here, and we regionally syndicated the show and had a good run, almost a 10-year run. And then everybody kind of knows the state radio's in right now. And about a year ago, they canceled the network, and it was kind of like, what am I going to do next? And, you know, I think we've all kind of seen, you've been ahead of the game in what you're doing, and we're all seeing how technology is kind of morphing in a direction. I think radio will always be there. That's not going anywhere. But I think for people that, you know, after 25 years in the business, I hope I've done my work and got an audience and done enough in the community. And so we decided to launch Zazza Nation, which is a global app that you can listen to the show on. And I'm literally broadcasting my morning show live from my home studio that we built over the last 8 months.
I can't put into words. I don't want to kiss his ass too much, but Mike McVeigh, dude, a lot of radio executives, I think, care more about keeping their job and like crunching numbers. Mike McVeigh is a radio saint. I can't explain how much he has helped me.
He's a legend. And, you know, I had wanted to work with Mike for a number of years. I was at iHeart. Well, it was J-Core back in the day, and then Clear Channel, and then iHeart. I was there for a while, and then at CBS after that. And, you know, we had talked about working together a number of times, but every time something came up, I was under contract. And when I was let go by CBS in Dallas, he flew out the next day, and we had a meeting, and he was like, I really want to get you over here to work with me. And a couple months later, I took the job. The funny story about it is he asked me, you know, I've got this opportunity in Melbourne, Florida. Well, excuse me, he said in Melbourne. And I said, oh my gosh, Melbourne, Australia. I just got back from Sydney. And he's like, no, Melbourne, Florida. And I was like, man, where is that? But I came here and I fell in love with it. It's a beach town similar to the beach town I grew up in San Diego. And shortly after that, Mike syndicated the show, and we were off to the races. He's every bit of a legend. And you're right. He's a guy who truly cares about talent. There's no doubt about it.
What was it like working in Dallas radio?
Incredible. I mean, I got, you know, when I was first hired, this is going to date me, but I was first hired in Dallas in '98. Race Taylor, who's now at WCBS in New York, was our afternoon guy. Jimmy Steele, who just left Hubbard to do his own consultancy, was our program director. I mean, I worked with some really big names, Kid Craddock.
Nice.
And I became friends, you know, over the years. And it was just it was a very close-knit group of people, even if you worked with the competition. but it was very, very competitive. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had.
So I posted, I think, something about Lex and Terry a few months ago, and you commented that you worked with them. What was it like working alongside Lex and Terry?
Those guys were great. Again, I was so lucky to hang out with some of the great talent in radio. They were right down the hall from me on the rock station, and we were doing mornings together. And at the time, I was doing a morning show for a Hot AC before I moved over to CHR. So they're down there, talking about strip clubs and whatnot, and I'm down the hall talking probably about Madonna and John Mayer. But in the hall, those guys, are so nice and so welcoming, and I learned a lot from them.
I've worked for Mike Calta, who's pretty dirty at times. Well, compared to what I love about radio is you have the different formats in the hall. And pre-Me Too, we would have like naked girls in studio drinking. We did Cinco, did Drunko, where girls. It was kind of a ripoff of Drunk Bitch Friday that Lex and Terry did, to be honest. But we would just get drunk girls on. And then I would have to be the security guard to make sure they don't spill into the hall. And we had Chad and Christy next door, which was like this family-friendly show. And it's always funny when you got like debauchery going on in one room, and then in the next room is like, oh, here's the top 10 cat names of 2025.
Yeah, and prior to working with Lex and Terry, before we moved to that floor when they built us new studios, the morning show on the Eagle in Dallas was Mikey, and Eddie Papani was on, who's now in San Diego. He's a San Diego legend, but Eddie was on with Mikey in Dallas. And I remember they were doing Free Beer Fridays and had strippers from the local strip club in every Friday with listeners in the studio. And it was just a complete chaos in the hall.
Did you ever work in the same building as the Billy Madison show?
I did. Yeah. Billy was in that same building with Lex and Terry and I. Yeah,
Billy's a good dude. I never met him, but I used to board up their show at night on The Bun when they were syndicated in Tampa, and I've interviewed them. And when my cat was dying 5 years ago, but she's fine now, Derek donated like $100 to my GoFundMe. So they're very good dudes.
Yeah, they're super good dudes, down to earth, care about people, and they're ridiculously talented. Derek and Billy and Nard, all of them, they're all great dudes.
So, was there ever an interview you did that went wrong?
There are a couple of them. The two that stand out to me when I'm asked that question, one of them, it didn't really go wrong, but it was kind of awkward. I was excited to talk to Queen Latifah, and I don't remember what she was pushing at the time, but it was some big deal, and I was like, this is going to be great. And we're doing the interview, and I'm talking to her, and I realized about, 90 seconds in, the way she's responding to me, I'm like, something's not right. So I asked her, I said, can I ask you a question? And she said, yeah. I said, are you literally lying like in bed on a pillow? Because it sounds like you're lying on a pillow. She's like, oh yeah, I just woke up. I'm sitting here doing my interview from a pillow. I said, well, if you don't mind, can you sit up? Because it's hard to understand what you're saying. But the other one that I was kind of disappointed in, I was a huge fan of Ellen back in the day when she launched her show and her comedy and everything. And when we had her on, we were all amped up because the thing that I think she did really well was the games and stuff that she played with the audience and making them a part of the show. So we had some stuff set up for her to play with us on the air, and she didn't want anything to do with it. She just wanted to do the interview and be done. So those two stand out as not great interviews, but for those two, there's hundreds more that were fantastic.
Ellen confuses me. I don't know why she's such a mean person. I'm like, why?
Yeah, it's definitely a situation, especially with what kind of transpired, and I haven't interviewed her. That was probably 12, maybe even 15 years ago. But seeing kind of what brought the show to an end and all that, it was, you kind of have to wonder what life was like on that set, for sure.
Now, did you want to go into radio or did you stumble in it? And did you have any like shows that influenced you to go into it?
So that's a funny story. I did not have any aspirations of being in radio. I grew up in San Diego. My goals were to play either professional baseball or go get my degree and come back and be a San Diego cop. And while I was in school, after I was done playing college baseball, I got a job at a local radio station there. And I was board hopping. And then eventually I got my own show from I think it was noon to 2. And then I was doing sales and promotions, all the things, right? Wearing 5 different hats. And I remember the guy who owned the station at the time. I don't remember what I was making hourly, but I met with him and I asked him, for a 50-cent raise. Also at the time, I was writing for MTV.com as a local stringer. And I asked him for a 50-cent raise and he said, no, you're not worth it. And that was the defining moment for me. I put everything else on the shelf and I said, okay, we're doing this radio thing and I'm going to make it happen. And a couple months later, I got hired in Dallas doing weekend shifts and eventually worked my way up to overnight nights, took over afternoons when Race Taylor left the PLJ, and then worked my way up to mornings.
Nothing will motivate you more than a corporate boss that doesn't believe in you.
Yeah, and he was a super young. He was pretty arrogant.
Of course he was. He was young.
He was 39 at the time. I think he owned 15 stations in and around Texas. And it was funny because we maintained contact for quite some time. Because when I took the job and moved to Dallas for full-time overnight, he's like, that's all you'll ever be as an overnight guy. And then when I got promoted to nights, I sent him my business card, and then afternoons, same thing. And I continued to do that. And then finally, when I got to mornings and I sent him my business card, he said, best thing I ever did is not give you that raise.
The thing is, I find haters fascinating. I don't know if they're insecure or what, but I spent my whole 20s caring about haters, especially because I was working at the Bone where a lot of the listeners are losers that have like a parasocial relationship with the host. But I don't know. I feel like haters are fans in disguise. There's quotes about it.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement. And I early on, especially in this business, you got to have thick skin because no matter what you're doing, no matter what format, no matter what approach your show takes, you're going to have that one or those two that are always going to try to find things. And you can't let those two people ruin the greatness that you're doing with everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of transitioning. Not transitioning. I'm looking at radio and I'm looking at what you're doing where you're still doing endorsements and stuff with Cumulus. And that's kind of how I view my job at Beasley. Like it keeps you in the door, but I'm focused on podcasting because I'm curious about what the future is like. Obviously not everybody makes $100 million deal, but why can't I get there? You just got to do something different. Cause I feel like so many of these podcasts, bro, are people trying to emulate the Joe Rogan format. And what's funny is Joe Rogan admitted that he stole his format from Opie and Anthony. And I think that's why I don't like Rogan is because I know Opie and Anthony were kind of mean to a lot of radio shows that we see at the boot camp. But Opie and Anthony are one of my main influences for going into radio. And I feel like I'm mad that they don't have Rogan's spot in podcasting because they don't get along,
Yeah, and I think you're doing the right thing by focusing on what you're focusing on. I think there's a huge opportunity, and it kind of goes back to what my philosophy's been from day one. Outside of the radio show, I have a foundation that we do a charity event every year. And between what we've done on the radio and through the foundation, through the radio stations, and now, on Zazza Nation on the app, you build a community, and those community, those individuals in the community become loyal listeners. And if you do it right, they'll follow you and that base will build. So if you don't take a chance at what you're doing, you're never going to get there, but you're taking that chance and hard work pays off. So keep grinding, man.
No, I appreciate that. What are some of the mentors that you've gained from the morning show boot camp? And what are some things you've learned from it?
I think one of the biggest things I've learned from it, and when I first started going, I realized, man, this is very cliquey. And I
dude, the first 5 years, I don't mean to interrupt you after asking you something.
No, you're fine.
But the first 5 years, it wasn't until about 2018 that I felt like I was accepted. Like there are some douchebags, bro. Like there's some people that come up to you, I'm number 1, 18 to 34 with PPM. Yeah. And I'm like, good to meet you, bro.
Yeah, I've always kind of been fine with being the guy that, has had the opportunity to do major market radio for as long as I did and not really stand on top of something and scream from a hilltop.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. I'm very proud of the work I've done and what we're continuing to do. But I've met a lot of people there over the years. Kevin Ralston, who's one of my dear friends.
I just had him on.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And
Love
I worked with
KVJ.
Eric in Dallas. And, you know, I mean, like I said, some of the guys I've had the opportunity to work for, like the Jimmy Steels and the Mike McVeys and the Doug Hammonds. And, you know, I cannot stress enough the importance of networking, whether, you know, I ever go back to radio full time, doing a full time morning show, or just continue to grow this with what I'm doing. And I think this is the future, but, you know, never burn those bridges, because good talent is hard to find. And, you know, I think you're doing the right thing with, you know, kind of balancing both.
You know who is another one of my homies at the Morning Show Boot Camp in I think it was 2017 in Atlanta. I had nobody to hang out with, and I was sitting at the bar by myself drinking. And Miguel Fuller invited me with Holly, with Chubbs, with Mandy, with Jimmy, and we all went out to eat. And that made me feel so good. I didn't know who to hang out with. And Miguel has always been my guy. I love Miguel Fuller.
He's fantastic. Him and I are, you know, pretty close. And Holly's amazing.
She's
and,
great.
You know, they did great things in Tampa, and they're doing great things now. But he's definitely one that, you know, he's creative. That show in general, those two as a team are fantastic.
It's funny. Whenever I'm on a dating app and I talk to a girl either from the East Coast of Florida, they'll say, "Is your show like KVJ?" And then on the West Coast, when Miguel and Holly were in Tampa, everybody said, "Is your show like Miguel and Holly?" Like, those two shows really did a good job of like embracing their area. And they're doing a great job now in Charlotte.
They are. And, you know, I think one of the things that I recently said to somebody, and I think, you know, being local is still very, very important. But I also think community is the new local. And the more that we can get out and do things and, you know, help those that are in our community, that only continues to grow your brand. And you've got an opportunity in Tampa, you know, to do great things. And I just think that sometimes a lot of radio people, not everyone, but a lot of radio folks forget that when you're done in that studio doing all the creating and doing the bits and doing the planning, there's still that need to get out and impact those that are, you know, listening to you every day and help them where they need help.
I don't know. I forget who it was. Might have been like a rock DJ from like Madison, Wisconsin, or Wilkesboro, whatever it is, Pennsylvania. It was one of those towns, one of those like classic rock stations. And I remember I was sitting next to him at the boot camp maybe 7 years ago. And he was like, "Oh, you gotta do podcasting and social media to survive. I hate this. I miss the old days." Like, bro, you got to get with the time. Do you ever see those guys at the boot camp that bring their notepads and they're writing everything down? And you're like, bro, just be relatable.
Well, and there's also, you know, you've got to go where the listeners are now. And they're not always listening necessarily every single minute. And even though they listen to you for whatever time frame in the morning or afternoons or whatever your day part is, the more you can interact with them and engage them outside of that, that's the beauty of social media, you know. And I will say I need to do more of it, but it's definitely a tool between podcasting and social media that we didn't have when I first got started. And it's just such an incredible way to make sure that you're staying top of mind to those people, even in your off hours.
Eric Ralph from Rolla and Ryan is similar to Tommy Sablin from the Jeff and Jer show, where they're producers, but they command a room to be like equals.
Yeah, and they're both fantastic. So I grew up in San Diego and was a huge fan of Jeff and Jer. And actually, Jeff and his wife, Kristen, and I are really, really close now. We became friends at boot camp in Chicago years ago, and I stay in touch with them. But, I mean, you talked about just totally reinventing the wheel. And that right there, what they did in San Diego over the years that they were there and built that community and, you know, the things they did for the community, just incredible. And they deserve, and Tommy, you know, the first morning show producer to be inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. I mean, it speaks volumes of the team they built and what he was able to do.
Did you listen to the DSC growing up?
I did not, no, but familiar with.
I like to listen. I found them online like 8 years ago, and I like that edgy radio. San Diego is definitely a market that is good. Has there been a market you've worked in where you were surprised by it?
No, I was fortunate. I got that first gig in college. Didn't spend much time there. I spent most of my time in Dallas and then here in Melbourne. And, we were syndicated in Melbourne, Fort Walton Beach, Destin, and Mobile, Alabama. So I got to visit those markets, but that's really been it. I've been fortunate enough. Some people love moving around and exploring the country. I always thought, let me build some roots and build a base and, try to stay here for the long haul. But I guess when I got to Melbourne, being a much smaller market than Dallas, I think what surprised me in a really good way is just how giving and caring this community is about others in the community. Because I brought my charity event here and I had no idea what to expect. But, when you ask this community to show up for others that need help, they show up and they show up big.
Now, when it's prep time and it's a slow news day, how do you find things to talk about?
I think it's one of those situations, and this, having been in the business for a long time, we're always prepping. And that's what always was funny is the misperception with the people, not only outside of radio, but in radio, like salespeople. I had a guy ask me a few years back, he's like, so you've got the best gig ever. You work 4 hours a day and that's it. And they don't understand. We're working 24/7, right? We're watching the news. We're reading stuff online. We're flipping through TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and whatever. And I think Bert said it best at a boot camp probably 5 years ago. He said, with as much access to information around the world that we have and so many different websites, whether it's relationship-based or news-based or comedy-based, there's no excuse to not have something to talk about if you're doing a show. There's just so much that, and I think for me is how can I take this piece of information that I came across, tie it into a story that I've experienced in my life and make it relatable to the person who's on the other end of the speakers to bring them into the conversation as well.
My favorite Bert Weiss memory was probably 2018. I asked if I could get a picture with him, and he goes, I need to stand on a chair because he's like 5'5" and I'm 6'9", and he stood on a chair and he's still not taller than me.
That's hilarious. Bert's a good dude. I knew Bert and I met Bert before I got into radio when I was writing for MTV, and my assignment was to do an article on the #1 station in the market I covered, which was Dallas. So I got to spend a day up at Kid Studios before they were, big time syndicated. And it was him and Kelly and Big Al and Kid. And Bert was kind of my contact guy for the day. And he was fantastic. And we hit it off then and stayed in touch over the years. And he's a good dude.
What was Kid Craddock like? Because he died a week before my first morning show boot camp, so I never got to meet him. But I have met Kelly.
Kid was amazing. You work in a market like Dallas with a legend like that that's commanded that market for as long as he did, especially when you move, you get moved to morning drive. You're like, wow, I'm competing against a juggernaut. But I remember it was after the boot camp in New Orleans, right before Katrina. We were all at the airport, and he said, let's go grab a beer. And we went and grabbed a beer, and he said, I just want you to know, you sound great. You're doing great things. Don't give up. Keep pushing. He's like, you're going to do incredible things in this industry. And, he always was there when I needed him. I started, doing this charity event. And one year I found out that when we did it at the holidays, the company ended up 1099ing the families as winners. And these were families that were in need. And he was my go-to because he had kids. And I said, what do I do? And he's like, you start a foundation. You start a 501c3 and make it to where that never happens again. And that's when the Zazza Community Foundation was born. And, we continue to do the Jingle Jet event at Christmas time. But he was the one that pushed me to form the foundation so that we could help people and not get taxed as winners, but, actually help people when they need it most.
If you were offered another radio job, would you move?
It's a tough question because my husband is an attorney and he loves what he does, and he works, at the firm his dad works at. We love it here. He would have to take another bar exam if we moved out of Florida. It would have to be, and we've talked about this, it would have to be the perfect scenario, the perfect storm, if you will. All the things would have to come together and align. but I'm having a blast doing what I'm doing. You know, I wake up, my alarm goes off, I walk 10 feet into my studio and crack the mic and have a blast for 4 hours. That's tough to beat.
So I want to ask you about when you realized you were gay. So for me, I realized I was heterosexual in '05. I had Rihanna's CD, I had the Pussycat Doll CD, and I had Hillary Duff CD. And I would just look at, without doing anything, I would just look at the like album covers and be like, oh my goodness, are you good looking? And that was kind of when I realized I was into girls. Is there a specific moment you remember in your life where you realized you were gay?
Well, here's the deal. So, I don't know that this is the right way to answer.
No,
I don't know that there is a right way to answer. But for me, it's always just been an attraction to people. Like I've dated a ton of women.
Oh, really?
And
nice.
I just felt more of a connection when it comes to dating and, you know, things that I have in common with guys. And, you know, thankfully after years and years of dating back and forth, I was lucky enough to come here, and they say everything happens for a reason. I just remember thinking, you know, all my family, my siblings all moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area as they were finishing up whatever they were doing and entering adulthood. And then I up and bailed on them here. And, you know, within 6 months of being here, I met a guy who would then become, you know, my husband. And I kind of look back on it and go, okay, so this was a part of the plan all along. It just took a little while to get to this chapter.
How'd you meet him?
So I first saw him and his husky at PetSmart. And I thought, man, that's a good looking dog and that's a good looking dude. And I said hi to him, and I said, you know, I was like, hey, beautiful dog. And he's like, thanks, man, and kind of blew me off. And then a friend of mine came to Dallas to visit, and I had told him about this guy I saw at PetSmart. Long story short, we had one club here in town that was LGBTQ friendly, and he was like, let's go. So we go, we're playing pool, and I look up, and I said, that's the dude from PetSmart. And my friend Eric disappeared, and I look up about 2 seconds later, and he's at the bar talking to Connor and called me over, and that was the first time we actually met, and, you know, kind of just kept in touch from there, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
How long have you been with him?
So we started dating in April of 2016, and then we got married on March 6, 2020 in Cabo, Mexico, a week before the world shut down for the pandemic.
Oh, damn.
And the running joke with all of our friends and family is, you guys just got married, you were newlyweds. If you survived the pandemic together, you can survive anything. And we loved it. I mean, no, I didn't like what was going on and, you know, all of that, but we definitely took advantage of having to be locked down and, you know, and just using it to connect even more.
I feel like relationships either really grew during 2020 or failed.
I think that's spot on. I know a lot of people that had been married for a number of years that I never in a million years would have thought their relationship would ever end, that did. And then there were others that I thought kind of were on the brink heading into it and came out on the other side even stronger. So it was either you really, you know, I think it's one of those situations. You either really love being around the person that you're with, or you realize real quickly that too much time is too much time.
Now, before I let you go, would I be able to get you to record a liner?
Sure, absolutely.
It would be, hey, this is Tony Zazza, and you're listening to Hoppe Hour with Ryan Hoppe.
Yeah, let me just make sure I do this right.
You're good.
All right, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's Tony Zazza, and you're listening to Ryan Hoppe with Hoppe Hour.
Damn, dude, I appreciate it. Now, if people want to check out your show, how can they listen?
So a couple ways to do it. They can download the Zazza Nation app. It's 100% free in the Android or iOS app store. They can go to zazzanation.com and listen live there, or also click on the link to download it there. Or they can listen on Alexa by saying, Alexa, open Zazza Radio. So plenty of options. It's global. Alexa's available in the UK as well. We've got listeners. The show's been listened to in 18 countries now and 38 of the 50 states. So we're excited about that.
Well, dude, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show. when I see you this summer at the boot camp in August in Austin, Texas, I promise I won't be so drunk that I don't remember talking to you.
Sounds good. We'll make sure to connect and have a drink together.
Awesome, bro. Because Eric Rouse said he wants to get a drink, so we should just get drunk together. Drunk enough.
Let's do it. You never know what's going to happen when Eric gets drunk.
Well, dude, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show. Keep up the good work, and thanks for calling in the Hoppe Hour with Ryan Hoppe. I appreciate it.
You keep doing the same thing, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, bro. See you in August.
All right. Take care, man. Thank you.
Bye. So if you want to check out my show, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. I have two versions. One, it's like a morning zoo and a podcast where it's kind of edgy and I talk about celebrity news. And I have a version where I interview radio hosts. Go to every single major platform that has a podcast and search up Hoppe Radio. Hoppe Radio.
TikTok, clocks are juking, playing cruel pranks. Hoppe's hour almost done. Feels like robbery in banks. Ryan Hoppe on the mic, dropping wisdom in streams. Syndicated sorrow, now it's time to shatter dreams. Oh, the Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. But the laughter's growing dim. Eardrums mixing Hoppe like fingers without rings. DHX to FM, shoutouts hit the street. But soon the sound will vanish like shadows in the heat. Oh, the Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. Phone lines buzzing, but the laughter's growing dim. Drums mixing Hoppe like fingers without rings. DHX to FM, shoutouts hit the street. But soon the sound will vanish like shadows in the heat. Oh, the Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. Oh, life's just so unfair. Like clockwork to a show. Now it's time to face the silence like a TV on snow. Ryan Hoppe held the mic with humor so divine. The void left in our hearts wider than a canyon line. Empty speaker silent time but coming to an end. Like a roller coaster stopping round the river's bend. Hoppe's jokes and jabs, these are daily grind. Now silence louder than the thoughts we can't rewind. Oh, the Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. The Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair.
Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour.
RyanHoppeRadio.com.
And like that, he's gone. Hoppe Hour is now over. Game over.
This concludes our broadcast day. Good night, and God bless America.
Doors closing.